Welcome back to Let's Break It Down for You. I have a wonderful guest here today, Marge Andre from Richmond Hill, who is really a community builder, but also has been doing a lot of work in Indigenous rights, I'd say, as well as women's rights, equal rights for all people, and just a great person. So thanks, Marge, for coming in to have a conversation with me for today.
It's my pleasure. I always enjoy an opportunity to talk to you, and especially about these issues like social justice, bringing compassion to the community, building a better community is really what I want. And certainly seeing you do a lot of that. So, so we're going to have a good conversation about that. One thing, though, is really talking about women's issues. And, I just hear so many women say, I'm not getting involved in politics. It's just, I want to stay out of it. So can you talk about that aspect of what you're doing and why, despite that, are you in politics?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, Marge, because, a lot of people question my sanity, quite frankly,
Yes.
when I got involved. But having been a lifelong feminist and someone who's been an activist in different ways, and obviously growing up in a political family, I just felt it came a time where it was important for me to be involved. And as a feminist and somebody, again, who supported women's rights, I looked at what the Liberal Party is doing under this government of Prime Minister Trudeau. And they really have been doing so much to continue to advance women's rights, not just women's rights, human rights, people's rights, and community building. But as part of that, the idea that we are a feminist government, which just means that we believe that women and men should have equal rights, and people of all genders should have equal rights.
Yeah.
It's funny. Some people look and go, "Oh, that's a woke, perspective or whatever." It's not. It's just about fairness, justice, and inclusivity. And it's really, for me, the idea that we had a government that came in and said, we're going to have 50% women in the cabinet, in leadership positions, was really important because we know that still today, and as you said, women are more reticent to get involved, but that we only have 30% women in the House of Commons. We can't change the electoral system or women running for office, although we're very supportive of that in the party, and we try and encourage women to run, as well as men and people from other backgrounds, but we're very supportive. But the electorate decides, and when there's more male candidates, you'll get more males in Parliament. The Liberals now have 36% women in caucus in Parliament. The Conservatives only have about 16 or 17%. And the three last by-elections where a Conservative was elected, all men. We've seen in our riding, Marge, the Richmond Hill area and Aurora, that the last nomination, 2 men made it onto the ballot, despite there being 4 women at different times who were interested. It was really, you look at it and say, when you look at the outcome, do women have an equal chance still? And I know most people don't believe in affirmative action programs. We're not putting in place affirmative action programs, but we are trying to put in supports. And it's good for women, but it's also good for communities, Marge.
Yeah.
The more people that are able to be engaged and be part of community, the stronger the community. And it goes for the economy, too.
Oh, yeah. I think the word supportive is the best way. We need to really build a supportive community. Mm-hmm. I think females are better at being supportive, better at listeners. And I think when you have that mix, it changes the dynamics of if you're in the boardroom or if you're in Parliament. I think you'd agree?
Absolutely. And I actually think that the fact that we had a government that had 50% women is partially the reason we had such a good, if there can be any good outcome during COVID, but why our government did well in terms of when you look at mortality rates, when you look at supports for businesses, for families, and even the recovery post-COVID, how quickly our economy came back. A lot of that, I believe, was due to having women and men working together. Yeah. And I'm not advocating for all women. I'm advocating for a balance. I'm advocating for partnership and working together to bring the strengths and different perspectives that people's different lived experiences, they give us, right? And we know as women, we do more of the caretaking still. We have the children still, for the most part. We're the ones when someone needs help that with elderly parents, for the most part. Now, things are starting to change, and I'm happy to see that. But I still think there are differences in perspective in the ways we operate, even being able to multitask. I'll tell you right now that in Parliament, women are way better at that than men. And it's not to say, and men have their strengths, don't get me wrong, Marge, but you know what I'm just saying? I think that the combination of the two is very powerful in bringing balanced, compassionate policies that address, you know, all aspects of our life. And I think that is so important.
Yeah, definitely. Have you experienced any negative things?
Yeah. You know, it's really, in a way, it's encouraging to see what our government is doing. It's discouraging to see where the world is going right now.
Yeah.
And I feel, you know, when I started in my career back in the, you know, 80s, 90s, and, you know, there were 10% women in my first job, and where I remember one of my first positions where there was a young man who I knew who had the same position as me. He was from Western, I was from U of T, same commerce degrees, and he was being paid more than me. And I was like, what is that about? You know, and that happened. It was very blatant at that time, and it's continued. But you know, I thought we have been making progress, but now what's happening is this kind of backlash that somehow women having equal rights or women having equal opportunities is woke. That there's something that it's not fundamentally a human right, a right of all people. And I don't understand how that's happening, but you're seeing this backlash around the world. We can look to our south where abortion rights, right? Look at what's happening in Afghanistan right now, in Iran just yesterday, Marge, you know, another law was passed where women can be executed because of what they're wearing, the morality clause, you know, corruption on earth. It's just incredible. Syria, I'm worried about. You can look at even, you know, in Israel, the Netanyahu government has done things in terms of judicial reform, which have been prejudicial to women. Yeah. You know, it's not, and it's, I can go on, Hungary, you know, I can go on and on.
The patriarchal is out there, and I really feel it's bad for all of us.
Absolutely. It's not only women.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, I worked as, I think we've discussed before, I worked in microcredit, helping people start small businesses globally in North America and around the world, mostly in South America. But I'll tell you this, that it was not restricted to women, but 90% of the people who applied for this funding to start small businesses were women. Yeah. And when a woman succeeds in business, she uses the money for her family, to get uniforms for her kids to go to school. She has more autonomy. And often, you know, it brings up the whole family, where sometimes I think in some cultures, men have more of a sense of pride that they won't do anything it takes to make that happen. And women will often. And I think, you know, again, you know, it's just that balance in empowering women, but it brings up the whole community. Yes. It brings up the family. The children have a better educational opportunity. The men in the family prosper as well. The relationship is better. I mean, these are all things, and raising the children is better. There's so many things that comes from everyone being able to play their part. And on an economic, when you look at that on a larger scale, economies do better. You know, this is what is happening now in development in many parts, is to seeing women as the underutilized or the part of the population where there's more possibility to actually increase productivity, to increase workforce participation, to increase GDP growth, because they have been underutilized in so many societies. And so bringing them in helps growth. And the same way in Canada, you know, our childcare policy, we now have 85% workforce participation across Canada in women between 35 and 55, the key years. Yeah. That is incredible.
Amazing difference that had. Can you imagine it if we didn't have that?
Well, yeah. And it's a possibility that we won't, Marge.
We won't, yeah. And the childcare, the dental care, just having a supportive environment. Like, I think in the States they don't have that. And I think the life expectancy is like 8 years difference, I think I heard. Yep. And it's like, whoa.
Oh, I know. And, you know, I have some of our families in the United States, and one of my daughters-in-law was talking to her about the policies in Canada. Like, they don't get maternity leave.
No.
They don't get any paid maternity leave. Like, it's up to the company. It could be, I think she went back after 2 months. You know, it's, there's no childcare, universal childcare at all. There's no health care.
Yeah,
I mean, it's only if you have a good employer. I mean, yes, people manage to get, most people, but a lot of don't have health care. My daughter-in-law's family does, or my son and daughter-in-law's family does. But, you know, these are basic things, and they don't have them. And they kind of look at us and go, really? And I'm like, yeah. You know, that's part of the things we provide, is a compassionate and supportive people who care about people's experience and giving all people a chance. Yeah. to participate and to prosper. And
We all do better when we all do better. And
Exactly.
It's,
Yep.
I just hope that, I just so wish that that was the philosophy, the value that we all had. And I certainly commend you for stepping forward, trying to get that voice heard, working at that. And, you've probably taken a few knocks from trying to do that. And some
Yeah.
days you must wonder when you get out of bed, what am I doing?
Yeah, no, I know what I'm doing. Some days you wonder, is it worth the cost and is it effective? I mean, I think that's more it for me.
Okay.
I know why I'm doing it. I know what I want to do, but it has gotten so much more toxic. And I must say, Marge, it is since Pierre Poilievre became leader of the opposition. It really is. It's been getting worse and it's global. But this acceleration over the last year, we are seeing women decide not to run again. We are seeing in the House of Commons women being demeaned, spoken down to, disrespected. And it's not being called out. It's not being stopped. And, we just have to have it stopped because we are setting an example for the rest of society. And if people are looking at this and seeing this happen and thinking, oh, it's okay for me to talk that way, or okay, I don't have to respect these institutions, these people. And it's not respect in the sense of looking up to them or whatever. It's just being decent.
Yeah.
Treating them with decency, and respecting the job they're trying to do. Even if you have a difference of opinion about something, that's fine. But don't make it personal and don't make it misogynistic. Don't make it sexist. Do not demean women in particular and target them. And I've had that experience, and I have one of my committees where the opposition will take clips of me speaking and use it out of context, which is a kind of misinformation because they don't take the entire context of what I'm saying. And then they'll say something else that I'm saying something else. They'll post it on social media.
Yeah.
And then I get all sorts of misogynistic, hurtful, or horrible, and sometimes threatening responses on social media. And it goes beyond that even. And then, Rebel News picks it up, or they put it on a clip with Pierre Poilievre. And I just feel like saying, we're in this place, we're in committee to do serious work.
Yeah.
I should not have to be worrying about whether somebody in the opposition is going to take something I say out of context. That means I can't do my job, Marge.
Yeah.
If I'm constantly thinking, how will this sound if they take a clip? I have to be focused on the substance of the issue, and just being free to question witnesses, free to understand, what's going on and to make my points and to have that debate. But you can't do that when people are using it for social media and just there to take clips and make statements and use slogans. It's really impeding the work of our government, and it's making it so that fewer women want to run. And we're, as I think I said, we're up to that 30%. We need to keep going.
Yeah.
And we need to have representation not just by gender, but across all different peoples across Canada, groups. We want to make sure our House of Commons is representative of our country.
Yeah.
And I think we're doing a good job in the Liberal caucus. We can do even better, but we are doing a good job. But the rest of the House, and especially the Conservatives, are not. I always say to people, when you see during question period, they'll see a picture of the leader of the opposition and the people behind the leader of the opposition. It's nicely arranged so that almost all the minorities and all the women are in that shot.
Okay.
If you were to take the camera and angle it the other way, you would see a very different reality where there's very few women or people of color or any other group than basically white men.
Yeah.
We want white men in Parliament, don't get me wrong, but we want it to be proportional. We want the voices of everyone, and when you have 60, 70% of one group, it means you don't have the voices of other people, and that's not okay.
No.
It's not okay.
No, and I really worry about younger women getting involved in politics. Like it's like, why would they do it? It's are you going to be supported? I don't know. And you and I are about the same age, so I'm going to say I worry about what's going to happen. 20 years from now, you're not going to be in politics. I hope. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I hope not either in 20 years. I hope for another 4 at least, but not for 20 years.
Okay. And we need to be nurturing, encouraging, not discouraging.
Absolutely.
Young women and young
people. Yeah.
A whole diverse range of people. We need to encourage them that we live in a good, supportive community, country, and you can make a few mistakes.
Yeah,
and
but you can make a difference without being abused and harassed.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, our system of government, which is based on a system hundreds of years old, the Westminster parliamentary system, which has some good points, but our country has changed so much, Marge. And that system was designed, quite frankly, by white men for white men.
Yeah.
It was not designed to be inclusive and cooperative. It was designed to be confrontational. And it doesn't work for everybody. No. And, some things we've done, as you probably know, I'm the chair of the Women's Caucus in Ottawa. And so we try in our Women's Caucus to really be supportive of one another and help and talk about some of these issues. In the riding, I make sure that we have youth engaged. I have great team members who have helped with, co-op programs that we bring youth in or summer programs for leadership. And I encourage young women constantly as well as young men. Get involved in whatever part. You don't have to be a member of parliament. You can work in the party. You can work in an office. You can make a difference. But I want them to be able to do it without fearing that they're going to be targeted, harassed, or, as something else. And in fact, recently we had this parliamentary pledge that was put forward, and it's for all people, but women in particular signed it. And it just says, Marge, as a Canadian parliamentarian, I pledge to support each other and call out abuse and harassment when we see it or experience it. Call on all our allies to stand with us to support women in office and call out all forms of abuse and harassment. Call on elected officials to uphold the high standards of conduct, focusing on respectful debate of the issues and not personal attacks. Now, senators have signed this. Members of the Liberal Party have signed this. Green Party, NDP. I believe some members of the Bloc. I don't believe anybody in the Conservative Party has signed this yet, Marge. And you look at this, and this is very basic civility. This is about treating people as you'd want to be treated. It's the golden rule.
Yeah.
The golden rule, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And why people are continuing to attack and abuse and single out and do things they know are going to be harmful to other members of Parliament. So in the Women's Caucus, we make that effort. In my office, I try and mentor young people. I try and encourage them. And I want to leave behind a Parliament where more people feel welcomed and that they can speak their truth, that they can work for what they believe in without facing harassment and abuse.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
No. Yeah.
It shouldn't be okay for anybody in this country. And I'm saying to anyone who's listening, if you think that we need to change, please look at the behavior of parties in Parliament right now. Look at the examples that are being set. Look at what people are doing to our institutions, including the media, including the Supreme Court, including our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Those are all things that are eroding civil society. And stand up for it. It's important. It's actually more important than paying a tax. Sorry to say it, but it really is. So let's think about those things as well.
Yeah, no, we have to really work at building a kind, respectful, and compassionate, one of my favorite words.
Yes, and I was going to ask you, because we have that group in York Region, right, Compassion York Region, which I think is such a great idea. And I was talking to a group from the United Nations the other week who were here, and it was for, I'm trying to remember the exact name, Peace and Governance as well, this group that came in, and with Fiona Durant and another wonderful woman by the name of Boca here in Aurora. And they were talking about civic diplomacy, or diplomacy at our level, and how it matters. Like the leadership matters, but the grassroots matter.
It does, yeah.
And building this up. So, what you're doing with Compassion York Region, with Sarah Jamel and with other people is so important.
It is. We have to work at it.
Yeah.
And I think we have to reinforce it. We have to call it out and be say, I don't like what I've seen, and just say, not accept what we say. If we see it on the news, have a conversation. I don't like what I'm seeing, and I think that's one thing we need to do. And this idea of how to have dialogue, how to have a good conversation, how to confront difficult issues. I think we need to be better at it. So that's.
And conversations are getting more difficult.
Yes.
One of the things that I, like everything, there's good and bad, right? And social media, the internet has brought us so many positive, wonderful things, but it's also impacted the way we communicate. And it's especially the algorithms in some of these platforms that bring people into these rabbit holes, and they don't hear anything other than what they're already believing. Then they go deeper and deeper into it. And it's not a conversation. You're not having a conversation on the internet. You're getting fed things. You're getting fed things constantly. Reinforcing. And it's just, it's and then people start to have different sets of beliefs, but they even think they have different facts. The facts aren't different. There's misinformation out there. Facts are facts. But unfortunately, the facts are not being addressed, or there's really, quite frankly, lies out there.
Yeah.
People are being misled. And it's very hard to have that kind of conversation with people. And I think that one of the things I've said often is that I feel like right now we're fighting against this misinformation campaign. It's not only from Canada. This is a campaign where foreign interference and influence has been a big part of it, especially coming up from the South. And remember, they do not have limits on what can be spent during elections.
I know.
They can spend as much as they want, and these third-party groups can. And so people with special interests, multinationals, really wealthy people who want things to go in a certain way, they are flooding the airwaves.
They're controlling.
And we get it in Canada. We're on the same platforms.
Yeah.
We're hearing all of that coming into Canada.
Yeah.
And this is affecting us. And I call it the Americanization of Canada to an extent. And there's a lot of great things about our neighbor to the south. And as you know, I've lived there. What a wonderful things. We have to cooperate. We have to work together. But when these influences come in that are detrimental to our democracy, to our Canadian values, I am very concerned about that, Marge. And we have to stand up as women, as people, as Canadians, to protect it and to work for a more compassionate, better, a kinder, gentler nation. And that's Canada.
That's what we need. And I've heard people, Americans are disguising themselves as Canadians. So that I see is still good. There's still hope that Canada will be
I know.
That goodness.
Beacon, yeah. But it doesn't happen without people working for it and recognizing what's going on.
Yeah.
And I keep saying the next election I'm going to run again, as you know, because I feel like we need women candidates. We need strong voices. And we just, despite gender, we need people who are really doing it because they care about democracy, about the community, about good policy. And I'm not saying we have good policy cornered. There's a lot of good policy. But the point is, have debates and study policy. Don't make it personal. Don't make it ad hominem attacks. Don't make it about, all about politics. We're here to represent people and to make Canada better. Yeah. That's our job, not to play politics all the time. And I get frustrated with it. Anyway, but I think we need to keep moving forward, and we need to protect the progress we've made as women, as communities, as society. And we need to just be aware that some of what's happening in Canada is not made in Canada.
Yeah.
It's coming from other places, and as Canadians, we have to be aware. I say to everyone, in the next election, know what you're voting for. Don't just vote against something. Don't just listen to a slogan without really understanding.
Definitely. Yeah.
Like, please, democracy works when we take our responsibility as voters seriously, when we actually do the work to not just listen to one channel or one perspective, but when we actually have debates, when the media can actually ask questions.
Yeah.
Right now, in the last elections, Conservatives didn't show up at debates. They don't talk to media.
No.
Like, how are Canadians supposed to know what they're thinking, what's going on, and what their plans are if they're not communicating? No, they're communicating through social media clips and advertising, things they control. So it's just their narrative that gets out there rather than a conversation, rather than a debate.
Yeah. I like the word conversation versus debate. So I will.
I do too.
Let's use the word, we're going to have good conversations, try to understand each other.
Yes.
And when you say you do or do not like something, make sure you understand really what you're saying. And I find a lot of people, I'll ask them, what do you mean by that? And they don't like that. They have, and they realize they've bought into a very simple slogan. And I think it's the rest of us' job to ask nicely. Don't make them feel bad, because they may feel bad, but just question it and give them some extra facts, and then ask them if they could look at things a different way.
Yeah, and some people don't care that much about it, Marge, and some people are really busy, and I understand that there's no better and worse. It's just that the future of all of us, all of our futures depend on understanding. And as a democracy, everybody, a voting makes a difference. I can look at so many election outcomes and say, it made a big difference. And this next election federally, a big difference. You can look at the last election provincially. You can look at some of the things Doug Ford has done, quite frankly. I don't think people really took the time to understand. Or really knew. Maybe they couldn't understand. I don't know. But it's our job, it's all of our jobs, collectively as Canadians, to do the work to understand. Because, there's been, you can look at the disappearance of Ontario Place, of the Science Centre.
Yeah.
You can look
What's
at,
next?
all highways and housing just for those who can already afford it. You can look at shelters not being built. There's so many things that have happened where, and our green space, right? Trying to build on the green belt, all those things. And, we've got the same issues federally, maybe even worse. I think worse, actually, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
And I hope people will take the time and feel the responsibility we have as Canadians, as electors, to actually, vote, but to understand what we're voting for.
Yeah, so let's hope lots of people go out and vote, but also vote intelligently. They've taken the time. And now it's easy. You can easily find the information you want. You are very approachable. You can ask people what is actually happening.
Absolutely.
And again, having those conversations, I think, are really, really important.
Well, and it's one of the reasons I'm doing the podcast, right,
Yes.
Marge? Because I'm trying to break things down a little bit. I'm trying to go a little bit more in depth. And maybe if people have time when they're commuting or running or doing errands or whatever, they can listen to a little bit about it, because I really want to make it as accessible and as understandable, I guess, as possible, and just to present some of the facts, not just the slogans of the politics. It's like, what's going on? What's really going on? Let's break it down.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of podcasts, as you know.
I
think
know.
they're very...
You inspired me.
Yes. It's very digestible.
Yeah.
And I say I listen to my podcast when I cut vegetables. So
Right.
I have a lot of onions in my dishes only because of that. So, yeah.
Well, and we started off talking about, community building, about compassion, about women's role and how women can contribute both in politics and public discourse, in the economy, and how important that is. And I think in closing, I just want to say to everyone that it's not a women's issue. It's a societal issue. It's about building communities, families. It's about all of us doing better as a collective. And I think to do that, we need to give opportunities and equal opportunities to everyone, at least a chance. It doesn't mean we guarantee the outcome, but let's make sure we have the chance. And that takes a feminist government. It takes a government that cares and supports all people, including women. Thanks.
Okay. Leah, can you expand on the Liberal policies for families, for that? I am concerned about that.
Yeah. No, I think it's important, Marge. And, some of the programs that we have in place, they help, they support women, but it's beyond that again, right? It's supporting families, it's supporting communities. So things like the Early Learning and Childcare program, a historic program, that is helping mothers and fathers. It's helping families. It's an affordability measure. It's helping people with young children. Right now, childcare costs have been cut in half in York Region. They were some of the highest in Richmond Hill in the country. That's like $900 a month in the pockets of these families for one child. So you can imagine if you have two children, And the other thing that I really like about it is it's early learning and childcare. So it's about quality childcare as well. And bringing in lots of different childcare options, bringing in different ways of doing it, but making sure it's quality. So all children have affordable childcare and they can have the same start in life.
Yes.
It's not just if you're wealthy that you can afford it, but it should be affordable to all parents who want to go back in the workplace and who need childcare. And that's pretty much everybody these days.
Yeah.
And I think for women, when you think about that, why women haven't broken that proverbial glass ceiling, I think it's often because those childbearing years and child raising years are critical years in your career development. And often, and look, I'm all for women making whatever choice they want. If they choose that the best thing for them is to stay home with their kids, more power to them, and thank you. It's great. But for a lot of women, that's not either economically or professionally. That's not their top thing they want to spend their time on. And they should be able to be parents, have a family, and have a career just like men are able to do that. So this helps a lot. That's just one example, Marge. But I would say things like dental care and pharmacare. Those things will help with affordability. They help families. They help seniors. They help everybody. But these are things that are building blocks for a really good society where people have access to the basic things that they need. And we try and make it with a lot of these things, the Canada Child Benefit, which I think a lot of people don't even realize was a Liberal government initiative because it's been around since 2015 or 16, right? But we took a program that was really geared more to tax credits and the wealthy, and we made it for all Canadians, but based more to people who needed it more, right? And we made it means-based, and we tried to provide enough money so kids didn't grow up in poverty. And over 500,000 children have been taken out of poverty, living in poverty because of that program. That's huge. And for me, I'm very proud because we live in a wealthy country, a country that cares, and we should not have children living in poverty. And now the National School Food Program. Yeah. We saw the increase in food prices, right, and costs. We know there are children at school that aren't getting enough to eat. Again, that's an inequality thing because we all know that if children are hungry and thinking about their tummies instead of their lessons, they're not learning. They're not learning. And we want to make sure that they're not singled out. So putting in place these programs where, again, it's working with community, it's working with the provinces, the school boards, the groups, the organizations, charities, not-for-profits. We're working together to make sure every child has food in their stomach.
Yeah, I think the National Food Program is almost everywhere but Canada. So
I know. It really was a huge gap. And this is something, all of these programs are programs that the Conservatives voted against, Marge. Every one of them. And even now, I mean, we have over the holidays, we put in place the tax break for Canadian families because holidays are more expensive. And actually, it's a boost for small businesses too.
Yes.
Right? And restaurants, because this is from December 14th to February 14th. After the holidays, after Christmas basically, is a period where there's less activity for restaurants and businesses. So the fact that we put it in over that period, it will help stimulate economic growth as well. But it also helps Canadian families. Yeah. Being able to buy diapers GST-free. Maybe some members, the leader of the opposition thinks it's chump change. But you know what? I know. I have nieces, and I don't have kids yet. Well, I do have kids, but the ones who have kids are in the States. But nieces here and nephews who have children. And those things are expensive. And you know what? The HST on that makes a big difference. It can make a couple $100.
Yeah.
And over the holidays, that makes a difference, Marge, So we're trying to do things to support families, to support communities, and really just to make sure that we're compassionate, we care. It's not all about one economic metric. It's about well-being for people.
Like both the childcare and the pharmacare, it's not just an economic issue. Like children learning at an early age is so important.
Oh, for sure.
And having medicine, it's just humane, but it's better for the whole family if the mother gets their diabetic medication.
Absolutely.
And it's just the ramifications just like, come on.
And I call these investments in social infrastructure because all of these programs are not just giveaways. They are actually good investments with a good return on the investment. Definitely. And the return is that down the road we have fewer people in the emergency room because they haven't taken their medication. Yeah. With oral health, for example, with childcare, we don't have the problems, perhaps, of somebody rushing back or a child being left unattended. And then you can go to the issue of public safety and security for women and gender-based violence. Yeah. Again, all of these things, when there's a breakdown of a family and where certain family members feel endangered but don't feel they have the ability to get out of that situation, it hurts the people in the relationship. It causes a lot of violence in situations. It hurts the children, Marge. Yeah. The children suffer. So by providing more money for shelters, by providing better programs for education around gender-based violence, we have the first national action plan to combat gender-based violence that was put in by our Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth. And some of these programs we put in place make economic sense as well. It's the right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do.
It pays off, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for asking about those. I think there's a lot, and I think this is one of the reasons I'm running against Marge. We've got to keep this. We've got to protect our progress. We have to keep moving forward, and we have to keep an eye on communities, on families, and our economy. But they all work together.
They do. Yeah,
they really do.
Yeah. Something else. I remember when abortion was illegal. Mm-hmm. Now it's not, but you look south of the border and you don't like what I see.
No, I know. And it's really interesting, Marge. Again, as chair of the Women's Liberal Caucus, something came out where the opposition party they have a statement written out that says they will not introduce legislation to recriminalize abortion or something. It's a very narrow statement. And once again, they won't answer questions. They won't talk. Their members don't talk about it. Nobody says anything because they're trying to make sure that they're appealing to those people who are anti-choice and get their votes. So they don't want to say they're actually going to support it, but they'll have this statement. Then they can say to women, oh, no, look here, we have that statement. However, the reality is in Canada, like in the United States, that there are so many ways to restrict women's reproductive and sexual health care. Right? It's not just about legal or not legal. And in Canada, we do not have legislation around it because the Supreme Court in Canada, which actually determined that it is a basic right under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms for women to have access to health care, including access to reproductive health care and abortion when needed. So there are ways that the Conservatives since '88, when it was actually decriminalized, it was a criminal activity, decriminalized, they have made several attempts to bring in legislation that the right to choose, people would say, is backdoor legislation that doesn't address it specifically, but that will then bring up in court questions about the ability of people to actually access abortion when needed. And there was actually a full frontal by Mulroney's government to actually recriminalize it, which failed. But this goes on. And when you listen to people like, for example, Arnold Viersen or Kathy Wagenthal in the Conservative Party right now, you will hear them talking about their mission is to do what has been done in the States. And most of the members of the Conservative caucus right now are considered by the pro-choice movement to be pro-life. And the pro-life movement would say the same thing. Well, I call it anti-choice. I don't really think it's pro-life. We're pro-life. But so there's this whole thing going on. And every time we brought up the once and we're told, oh, you're just doing that because your poll numbers are bad, you're scaring people. I'm like, no, I'm doing it because I've lived through it and I saw what's happened in the United States. This can happen here. We cannot take it for granted. We have to continue to fight for this and make sure we have a government that supports women actively, just doesn't say we won't decriminalize it or recriminalize it, but that supports women's right to choose. It's also access, Marge, as you know. We can have a law, but if the provincial health care systems do not provide access, what good is the law? Yeah. And for me, this is about equality again. Yeah. Because as we've seen in the past, women that have means will find a way to have a safe abortion when they need one. Mm-hmm. It's usually the women who don't have the means and are making very difficult choices that will either hurt themselves or go to some place which isn't legitimate or is not hygienic and will come up further complications. Stories we've seen of women dying and leaving kids behind because they couldn't afford the fifth kid from an accidental pregnancy. Yeah. And that's not okay. No. Like this is about compassion again, Marge. Yeah. And everyone should be able to make their own choice. Yeah. Them, their partner, their advisors, their doctor, whoever, but it's not something our government can decide for all women. Yeah. It's not something our government knows.
Yeah, I don't see it as pro-abortion. It's just access to abortion. Like I don't think there's this. We need to keep having aborting more babies. That's certainly not the case.
No, but they portray us that way, right?
Yes.
And I keep saying, as a woman, I have never met a woman who says, "Oh, yay, I get to go have an abortion." Are you kidding me? No. Like nobody wants it. It's a very, very difficult decision. Anybody knows. Yeah. As mothers, as people. Like it's a difficult decision, and it's one where it has to be decided by a woman, her partner. If there's a partner in the picture that you want to consult, maybe some community members, a religious advisor, if we want, a doctor. Like it's a personal decision, and it's a hard decision. And there's no way a federal government or a provincial government knows individual circumstances of people, and everyone should be able to decide. And for people who would never consider terminating a pregnancy, more power to them. Yeah. Do not. It's your right, but we have to give people who are in a very tough position the right to make those decisions for themselves too. Yeah,
the stories are all out there of horrible things that happen because of not.
And will happen again. We already see it in the States. Yeah, they'll happen again.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll keep working. We'll keep working forward for progress, for protecting the rights we have, and making sure that we're moving forward. And, one of the things I talk about, Marcia, sometimes, I know we should be, we can talk all day, but is about family values as well. Because this is one of the things that bother me is that often conservatives would say, take the family, the party of family values. And I'm thinking, it's not family values to have an ideological perspective that you're imposing on everybody, and then refusing to to fund childcare, or a national school food program. I mean, we're really interested and concerned about the well-being of people and the family. So, hey, if that person, if that woman or that couple decides that they want to have a child and bring it into the world, fantastic. Let's support them.
Yes.
Let's make sure when they have the child, they can afford the child through the Canada Child Benefit. Let's make sure that they continue to work if they need to economically or for their career, goals, and have quality early learning and childcare.
Yes.
Let's make sure that the family can stay together, that they have what they need. That's family values in my mind. Family values is not just some doctrine that you say, oh, you can't do that because of family values, and then you don't support families. That's not family values. And so I think we are about family values. We're about making sure that women, families, men, that seniors, that they're taken care of, and so anyway, when I hear that sometimes, and we're the party of family values, I'm thinking, you're the party of dogma. Sorry, but that's just the way I feel about it some days. Anyway, well, thanks, Marge, for your time. Really enjoyed talking to you as always, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations over coffee sometime as well.
Yes, very good. Okay.